where would you take him to have him be cared for? Probably back to the White House, right? Well, that was too far. They knew he wouldn't survive a trip to the White House, so as a result, the president was taken directly across the street from Ford's Theater to the second floor of the Peterson boarding house. It was simply a house that boarded people, rented rooms to people. So he's taken right across the street on the second floor of the Peterson boarding house. All of which you will see in about a year and a month. Okay? That takes us to our next subtopic then, which is 2 other assassination attempts, right? Happening at the same time that Lincoln was assassinated. So during this whole thing we've been discussing for the last 20 minutes, 2 other assassination attempts were occurring. Let's talk about Secretary of State William Seward first. Okay? The man that was assigned, the co-conspirator that was assigned to kill Secretary of State William Seward was Lewis Powell or Payne. I told you yesterday he went by both names. So Lewis Powell or Payne, Lewis Payne, was a man that was assigned by Booth to kill Secretary of State William Seward, and his helper was going to be David Harold. So David Harold and Lewis Powell or Payne were the 2 men that went with the idea of assassinating Secretary of State William Seward. It would be Powell or Payne's job to kill him. It would be Harold's job to assist him in that. Well, the 2 men arrived at the Secretary of State's residence, and Harold stayed outside holding Payne's horse. So Powell will be the one going in. We'll just refer to him as Powell from this point on. So Lewis Powell was assigned to kill Secretary of State William Seward with the help of David Harold, and when the 2 men arrived at the Secretary of State's residence, Harold stayed outside holding Powell's horse. Powell then knocks on the door, and when it was answered, he just insisted that he was there to deliver medicine personally to Secretary of State Seward. Anybody know this story? It's a great story. So Powell knocks on the door, and when the person answers the door, the servant, he simply says, "I'm here to deliver medicine to Secretary of State Seward." Well, what do you think Seward's servant says? "Oh, I'll just take it up there myself, no problem." And Powell simply pushed by him and headed upstairs to what they call the residence. If you live in these fancy places in D.C., you walk in, the residence is up on a floor above, where the bedrooms are, etc. So Powell knocks on the door, servant answers the door, says, "I'm here to deliver medicine to Secretary of State Seward." He says, "Oh, I'll take it up myself." He says, "No, I want to deliver it personally." And you can see that the servant was having no part of that, so he simply just pushed by him and headed upstairs to the residence. Well, once he got upstairs to the residence, Powell was confronted by Seward's son, Frederick. Seward's son was there. And he confronted Powell like, "What are you doing? What are you doing up here?" Right? Again, Powell says, "I'm here to administer medicine to your father." And Frederick insists on what? Doing it himself. Okay? So, as he's confronted by Frederick Seward, Secretary of State Seward's son, he says, "Oh, I'm here to administer medicine to your father." Frederick insists that he will administer the medicine himself. Well, Powell then takes his pistol out and fires it at Frederick, but the gun misfires. This is all, I'm not making any of this up, kiddos. So Powell pulls out his pistol, points it at Frederick Seward, tries to kill him, and his pistol misfires. So what does Powell do? He hits Frederick over the head with the butt of his pistol and hits him so hard it fractures his skull. That's what Powell did. So after his gun misfires, he hits Frederick Seward over the head with the butt of his pistol. You know what the butt of a pistol is? the grip. And he hits him so hard, he fractures Frederick's skull. Guess who witnesses this? Seward's daughter, Fanny. She comes out of her father's bedroom and watches this guy first try to kill by shooting and then clubbing her brother over the head with the pistol. And she is just frantic and screams. Now the reason that Secretary of State Seward is getting medicine, or would be getting medicine, they didn't really question the fact he was getting it, is he was up in his bedroom recovering from a carriage accident. He had an accident with his horse and buggy, and he was recovering. So when Powell came to his residence, did it seem odd that he was getting medicine delivered to him? Not really, but they didn't want him to give it to him. They wanted to do that. That's, whatever. So it turns out to be that point. Well, after Seward's daughter Fanny comes out of her father's bedroom, sees these horrific events and screams, Powell makes his way into the bedroom and sees Seward in his bed, again recovering from this carriage accident, and he pulls out a knife and stabs Seward several times. And he missed the first few times he tried because Seward was just a really skinny guy. And so he's laying in bed and he's stabbing at him, and he missed him the first 3 or 4 times he tried to stab him, just missed him because he's a tiny fellow. So Payne stabs at Seward several times, each time he misses because of Seward's slight build. Well, finally, he continues, and Payne stabs Seward in the cheek and the neck, then slashes him with his knife. And these would be wounds that Secretary of State Seward would have for the rest of his life. It would disfigure his neck and face for the rest of his life. So Payne doesn't quit after missing him the first few times. He finally continues. He ends up stabbing Seward in the cheek and the neck, and then slashes him with his knife. And these would be wounds that would leave the Secretary of State disfigured for life. But he doesn't kill him. Okay? So where are we going next? Where are we going next? What's the next assassination attempt? Andrew Johnson. So Andrew Johnson is at his residence at the Kirkwood House. That's where he lived, where the Vice President lived at the time. A residence called the Kirkwood House. And the man that was sent to the Kirkwood House to kill Vice President Johnson was George Atzerodt. We talked about him before. George Atzerodt. He would be the man that Booth would send over to Vice President Johnson's residence at the Kirkwood House. Well, this attempt, I'm sorry to tell you, kiddos, was not as dramatic because Atzerodt simply lost his nerve to kill the Vice President and went and got drunk instead. That's honest to God what he did. So that attempt didn't really happen, okay? Because Atzerodt got there at the Kirkwood House, lost his nerve, and proceeded to go get drunk. So, and this all happened at the same time as Lincoln was being shot in Ford's Theater, all three. Well, that'll take us to our next subtopic then, which is the death of a president.
Is this the first assassination?
The first assassination of an American president? So where is the president? Come on.
In the floor.
The second floor of the Peterson House. And he's laying in a bed, slowly dying. That's what he's doing. So back at the Peterson House, President Lincoln is slowly dying. And at his side is his wife, Mary Lincoln, and their oldest son, Robert Lincoln. So at the president's side, as he's slowly dying, is his wife, Mary, and his oldest son, Robert. Let me tell you a story about Robert. Robert is buried in Arlington Cemetery with his family, and we'll go see that in about a year. They had a younger son whose name was Tad, T-A-D, and they left him at the White House because they believed he was too young to see his father in such grave condition. So Mary Lincoln, the president's wife, and their older son Robert were at the Peterson house as the president lay dying, whereas younger son Tad was kept at the White House because the family believed he was too young to see his father in such a grave condition. More than 100 people visited President Lincoln during the night, including Vice President Johnson and many members of his cabinet. Johnson knew nothing of what? The possible assassination attempt at that time. Okay? So Lincoln was visited by more than 100 people, including Vice President Johnson and many members of the presidential cabinet. At 7 p.m. that evening, Lincoln's breathing slowed. 7 p.m. that evening, President Lincoln's breathing slowed. And then at 7:22, excuse me, I said 7 p.m. that evening, I meant 7 a.m. the next morning, sorry. At 7 a.m. the next morning of April 15, 1865, President Lincoln's breathing slowed. And at 7:22 a.m. on April 15, 1865, the President of the United States died at the age of 56. Anybody know Lincoln was only 56 years old? I'm 58. I think most people would think that Lincoln was much older than 56 at the time of his death. But he was 56 years old. Died at 7:22 a.m. at the Peterson House across from Ford's Theater. As he died, he was surrounded by family and friends and cabinet members. And shortly after the president was officially pronounced dead, Secretary of War Edwin Stanton stated, quote, "Now he belongs to the ages." So shortly after the president was pronounced dead, Secretary of War Edwin Stanton stated, quote, "Now he belongs to the ages."
Belongs to who?
The ages.
The ages.
Now he belongs to the ages, which means now he belongs to history. Now he belongs to the ages. You know, we're studying the ages, the history of the country. Okay, tomorrow we will talk about the manhunt for John Wilkes Booth and the South's reaction to the assassination. Okay? Then we're going to have a little bit of a review, so those of you who are going to be gone, we'll have, I'll tell you what, let's talk a little bit here. I got to talk. We got to talk. We got to talk as a group.